Alright, welcome to video 6, Distributive Justice and Social Structures. So far this week we've taken a look at the idea of justice in general, and we got a distinction from Aristotle between rectifying justice, which is like criminal justice, and distributive justice. And then we took a look at some basic ideas about argument to help us understand, to give us a toolkit that we can use to frame everything that we're actually going to be doing going forward. And then we read an essay by Iris Marion Young called Political Responsibility and Structural Injustice. So this is the first discussion of it, of that article. And then there's going to be an exercise and then another discussion of the article, and then we can go back and look at Evicted. Young's article begins with a discussion of an example that's a lot like the examples that we read about in Evicted. There's a woman named Sandy, and for a variety of reasons, mostly beyond her control, and entirely beyond her control, she winds up losing her home. And Young starts out with this assertion: many would agree with me further that Sandy suffers an injustice in the fact that access to decent, affordable housing is so difficult for her. What are the grounds for this judgment? Sandy's misfortune is not due to any personal or moral failing on her part. She plays by all the socially acceptable rules. So notice that this is an argument, right? When Young says, what are the grounds for that judgment, she is giving an argument indicator phrase, right? So we can actually put her argument like this. Sandy played by all the socially acceptable rules. Sandy still can't find a place to live. Therefore, Sandy suffers an injustice. Okay, and there's a further argument about this case. Nor is Sandy's situation a matter of sheer bad luck, like being struck by lightning. The major causes of Sandy's misfortune lie in the normal operations of markets and institutions of planning. So again, this is another argument here. We say that the major causes of Sandy's misfortune are products of the normal operations of the market. Therefore, this is not mere bad luck. This is something that we should anticipate happening all the time, right? So that's the setup for Young's essay. And then she goes off in a slightly different direction for a little bit to talk about a philosopher named John Rawls. And mostly what she's doing here for our purposes is tying the question of Sandy's situation and the injustice that she suffers back to the idea of distributive justice. So there's this passage from Rawls, and I'll just highlight one bit of it. For us, the primary subject of justice is the basic structure of society, or more exactly, the way in which major social institutions distribute fundamental rights and duties and determine the division of advantages from social cooperation. So this is exactly what we were talking about before when we were describing distributive justice. Any society is a cooperative effort that has certain burdens and certain benefits. How those are distributed in the ordinary operating of society is a matter for distributive justice. Rawls goes on to talk about the kinds of social structures that he is concerned with. He says, by major institutions, I mean the political constitution and the principal economic and social arrangements. So this is meant to cover all of society, not just like government or something like that. It is all of the basic arrangements of a society. Taken together as one scheme, major institutions define people's rights and duties and influence their life prospects, what they can expect to be and how well they can expect to do. So when you look at all of the social institutions as a whole, what you see is that they really just bound our lives. If you're born into a particular set of circumstances, that's going to affect everything about your life. Furthermore, these effects can't be said to be something that you deserve. You haven't done anything to merit them, because you were just born into that situation. You haven't even done anything yet. So Rawls says it is to these inequalities, presumably inevitable in the basic structure of any society, to which principles of social justice must in the first instance apply. We're always going to be born into a certain place and time. We can't change that, but we can talk about the justice of the basic arrangements of society. So, what do we have here? We've got a discussion of a hypothetical situation. It's a lot like the evictions we see in the book Evicted. Then we have a discussion of distributive justice, right? How a society distributes the burdens and benefits of that come with the society. The next thing we need to take a look at is the idea of a social structure itself. Because what we're doing here is we're saying that social structures, not just individual actions, but social structures can be just or unjust. So what exactly is a social structure? Here's the quote. As I understand the concept, structure denotes a confluence of institutional roles and interactive routines, mobilization of resources and physical structures. And these constitute historical givens to which individuals act and which are relatively stable over time. God, that's a mouthful. How can we possibly we'll actually be able to pull this apart. But let's keep going. Let's get another thing in here. To summarize, structures refer to the relations of social positions that condition the opportunities and life prospects of persons in those positions. The position occurs because of the way that actions and interactions reinforce the rules and resources available for other actions and interactions involving people and structural positions. Oof. Well, that's a mouthful. But I think we can unpack it. And what I want to do is to think about a completely everyday example of a social structure. I want to think about a McDonald's restaurant. If you've got McDonald's, if there's a McDonald's, that McDonald's is actually a social structure. And that means it's going to have all of these items: institutional roles, interactive routines, a mobilization of resources and physical structures, opportunities, constraints, habits, and expectations. Let me just run through all of these, right? Institutional roles. If there's a McDonald's, there are certain roles involved with it. There's an employee, there's a customer, there's a manager, there's an owner. The customer counts as part of the social structure. The structure wouldn't exist without customers. People in these roles engage in routines. There are just certain habits that you've got when you go to a McDonald's. People place their order. They give their money, they get their food. There are routines for opening and closing the store. There are routines for hiring and firing and paying employees. There are routines for restocking needed materials, right? So a McDonald's has roles, people in roles, and routines that those people are supposed to perform. The McDonald's also has is also a mobilization of resources and physical structures. So if you think of McDonald's, the first thing you might think of is the physical building. That is a physical resource. But there are all sorts of other physical resources involved with this. There's the food and the packaging. There are less tangible things that are resources. There's the budget. There's the relationship with the distribution networks, the relationship between the individual restaurant and the whole franchise, that sort of thing. All of these are resources, and they are mobilized. That is, when you run a McDonald's, you've got all of these things ready to be used. So once you're in one of these situations, you have opportunities and constraints. As if you're in one of these roles, you have opportunities for things like employment or profit, or if you're the customer, food. But you're also constrained. You're constrained by the laws of capitalism. You're constrained by the franchise contract. And we all develop habits and expectations around this. People are in the habit of standing in line for food. Also, you don't try to haggle. You know that you can't bargain for a better price at McDonald's. And you've got expectations. So customers expect that service will be quick and polite. Employees expect that customers won't make a huge scene, although that, expectation is often broken. So those are all the parts of a social structure. And we can actually apply this to other kinds of social structures. So, again, roles, routines, resources, opportunities, constraints, habits, and expectations. So the next exercise actually just asks you to think about Lorain County Community College as a social structure, right? You should be able to analyze what happens at Lorain County Community College the same way you analyze what happens at a McDonald's. So there are going to be institutional roles at this school, the same way there are at McDonald's. There are going to be routines. There's going to be resources, all of that. So that's the next exercise you need to do.